Hello and welcome to the sixth and final week of the Lift Your Spirits Mystery Crochet Along. I'm so excited to be showing you guys the final reveal of the shawl today, as well as talking about kind of the behind the scenes design process, some of the things that I started with before the shawl turned into what it did, and how it kind of got out of hand at one point. I was feeling quite ridiculous. Also, if you guys have started working on the sixth clue, which I'll have some spoilers at the end of the live here, were you surprised by that final clue? I love the way that the border finishes off the piece. And well, I guess you'll see that here anyways, because I'm going to spoil it right now. So here is my finished shawl. Oh, and it looks like Lindsay's joining us this morning. Good morning, Lindsay. Thanks for joining the live. I saw your progress photo in the Facebook group today. It's looking good. So here's my shawl, you guys. Ghosties for the mosties. I love it so much. If you guys watch my podcast, now you know I was going on and on about this Halloween design that I just could not wait to share. I just love the way the whole thing turned out. And it is a massive schlanket. And let me show you these tails here. So the way that the tails hang, I usually throw my arm in between the second and third ghost here on the large size, so that it doesn't go anywhere. And you just get these spooky, drapey tails. I absolutely love it so much. And the weight of the beads helps to pull everything down. Overall, it's an amazing shawl. But this was not my original concept. Let me show you one of the first sketches that I have for this shawl. Oh, did I get blurry? Why am I blurry? Here is the very first sketch that I did. And if you look at the notes here, swatch on US 4 3.5 millimeter knitting needle. I did a provisional cast on, and I cast on 48 stitches. And that was the first row, and then purl on the wrong side. And I had a chart that I had actually charted out in knitting, and that's what I was going for. I was going to chart just the one ghost and see if I couldn't reverse them back and forth up the length of a scarf, and then do like this beaded fringe tail. After I did my swatch, I had all these findings about what didn't work out. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the knit swatch to share with you guys because I frogged it, but I ended up realizing that the yarn over before an SSK is cleaner and a yarn over after a knit two together is cleaner. So I learned a lot about designing with lace, but I just didn't like the way the ghost was showing up. It was still this same kind of concept where you have those open spaces on the outside of the ghost to make it pop, but the knitting just didn't look right. So I totally scratched that, and I decided to crochet up a swatch. Oh, and it looks like we've got Books with Bead here. Good morning, and Amanda Baker. I can picture this version of the shawl, and it would have been super pretty too. Yeah, I mean, it still can be done, especially in crochet. And I'll show you my other swatch and why it's not completely ruled out. So once I realized the knit was just too much for me, because my home base is crochet. I've crocheted since I was a child. I even dabbled throughout my teenage years and really picked it up again in my mid-20s. And it is just where I'm the strongest. I have a better foundation of knowledge there. I've done a lot of complicated knit projects, but I just don't feel quite as strong to adventure into designing with knitting. So I went and I swatched up the yarn in double crochet. And from this washed and blocked swatch, I created my own graph paper, exactly to the gauge that I wanted, so that I could actually draw the ghosts the size that I wanted them to be. So once I realized I could do that, So I use several different notebooks. This is the notebook that I've been designing in lately. So my next part is a couple pages in, because between this sketch, I charted the extra section that I put in my personal hollow web and worked on that that was a couple years ago. This design has been slowly marinating for the last 3 years before it came out. I have the hand-drawn hat chart to the birdfoot hat that I released last year. All of that happened in between the time that I knit that swatch before I started crocheting it. Oh yeah, and I designed the would-be shawl as well before this happened. So I was sketching, okay, I still have my ghosts. Do I want to do it like a wrap or a stole? Do I want to do it triangle? And then that's when I realized I kind of always wanted those tails to be creeping off the border like I did. And that's when I landed on the actual shape and the actual design of the shawl. This one down here. At the time, I had just received Vogue's Ultimate Knitting book, and there's a section in there on shawl shaping, and I came across this shape, and that was kind of like the aha click moment of, this is how I'm going to be able to fit these ghosts into a shawl shape that's not super complicated. And I just love the look of a semicircular shawl. Now, the way that these increases on this shawl stack right here, it doesn't create a smooth semicircle. It's kind of like what is obtuse? An obtuse angle triangle? Is that is that the correct term? But still, you get the awesome shape that you have now. The only problem, and I ran into this after I got past the first section of ghosts, and you can see my original here that I thought I would, and it's kind of blurry, sorry about that. I thought that the the tail would come down in between the two ghosts better, but I ended up keeping that out in the final shawl, as you guys saw. It looks like, good morning, Maud. The chat is really acting up for me. Maybe there's more people having the same problem. Anyway, excited for this live. Well, thanks for joining me this morning. I hope everything is working out okay for you guys. Everything looks fine on my end. Could be a YouTube issue, kind of like what was going on with Facebook and Instagram earlier this last week. Good morning, Lori. Happy birthday, by the way. Today's Lori's birthday. So yeah, this shape. So I had my original ghost guy. I took him to my handmade gauge specified chart paper, and I drew it in, like literally drew a ghost, just the curves. Then from there, I started adding those chain spaces. Let's see, here's my ghost here. I started adding these chain spaces around the outside of my drawing, and then depending on the angle of the curve, that's where I started adding in those decreases or increases to give the shaping to the ghost. And I just would erase my line, add chain spaces, add increases and decreases. The most important thing when you're working this way is that every stitch is accounted for. So if you decrease, it covers 2 squares into 1, but you have to add a stitch in the square that you're taking away from. So in this pattern, it's often a chain. Let's see. Before I get too ahead of myself, look what happened, you guys. I started, because I told you this is to scale, and this shawl is massive. My chart is to scale. This is how it got out of hand. This is the pattern that I followed to make my shawl. How ridiculous is this? So, based on the shape that I wanted and the shape that you guys are all following, it's that triangle where the increases are stacked on the outside. So I hand drew the chart for the full triangle like you guys followed in the pattern. And so I started with just the shape. And then that's when I realized how far I needed to go before I could actually place my ghost inside of the chart. Like, did I have enough room to place his head so that his arms get there by the width that I needed it to? So, I mean, I really had to draw this in advance. I know I was cracking up when I sent this design to my tech editor with the flat photo, which you guys still haven't seen yet. She was like, I can't believe you designed this. Like, I believe you designed it, but I can't believe you designed this. And this is how I had to draw it. I absolutely had to draw it. And you can see when you draw it too, as long as you're accounting for all of your stitches correctly on the chart, you can start to visualize how cool is this going to be. Once I had my first ghost in place, that's when I decided to add kind of the swirls so that it wasn't just straight up solid all over. And then I added the ghosts down below, and this gave me a real problem because of their width, and you'll notice this in the pattern as well. I couldn't evenly space them centered on the main ghost and centered in between those increases. So that probably gave me the biggest runaround with this design. And in the end, it's not super noticeable, but the ghosts, they're not centered where those increases happen. It's not always symmetrical. So instead of having a curve like you do between these two ghost tails, where the increases are, you kind of got this little dip. But I feel like it's okay because it is the overall shape of the shawl, but I really tried to get rid of that, and I just couldn't find a way to do it. The other thing was originally, this one's in my lap. I had 2 or 3 ghost swatches that I did before I even landed on the final one, which I didn't even swatch. I just ended up starting the pattern and liking the way it looked and kept going. But just like my original scarf version that I showed you in the beginning, I also had this is a crazy sweat. My daughter got a hold of this as well. You can see sketching over it. This is when I realized I had to change the body from curved to the straight that you see now, because I was having issues with the way the tails were lining up around the border. And I was trying to figure out if those tails to the ghost aren't centered and they're all to the side, how crazy would that be? Because that's what I did in my very first ghost swatch. I originally had them drawn to not have a symmetrical tail. They were kind of sitting to one side. But because I knew that I wanted my border to have those tails, I was looking at this and it just looked so chunky and stubby that I just couldn't do it. So that is how the ghost bodies ended up the way that they did. Lori, thank you. You're welcome. I hope you have a great day today. And Mod, wow, yeah, that chart it was intense, and I kept having to fold it up to read it because, and you can see when where I finished off, I was using highlighter tape to try to not ruin it. I also had to follow, I had to write it in pencil because I was making so many mistakes and changing so many things as I went along that I couldn't use pen. But then also you can see I spilled water or something on it at some point, and I was afraid I was going to lose my whole chart in the process because, as you guys know, it really takes a minimum of 6 weeks to make this shawl if you have a good amount of time in a day to work on it or in a week. And so this chart was going around the house with me throughout the weeks that I was working on it with this here. And this right here is where I was trying to figure out the repeats between, because this ghost is the same as this ghost, but it's not centered, and you've got stitches that add, they shift because of the way that the increases work. You're increasing on the outside of this ghost and the outside of this ghost, and as that happens, it's not an even increase. Trying to figure out how to chart this shawl was also such a pain. So if you've ever tried to create your own crochet chart, there's not a lot of great programs out there. The one that I think is the most beginner friendly is Stitch Fiddle. They have a free version as well as a pay for version. I use the pay for version because I have so many personal charts in progress shared on their software. It's like a web-based software, and they have all of so I use their crochet freeform version. They have how to make knitting charts. I've used it for knitting charts as well. Like Grafgan color charts. I used that when I designed the plaid poncho for the crochet magazine, but I typically use their freeform crochet, and I find it very user-friendly for someone who doesn't have a background in graphic design and isn't super familiar with working with the things like, I don't even know what is popular. I use Clip Studio Paint, I think is what it's called. Outside of that for graphic art. And I am like super beginner basic, but good enough that I can create my own crochet charts. But I was struggling so hard to find a way to take this and condense it down into the pattern that you all received. Still 20 something pages once you put all the clues together, but something that was manageable, which is how it also ended up being like repeat the chart 4 times, because if I was to fit that entire chart on one page, the symbols would be so small that it would be hard to follow them and not really helpful. It's also how some of those wider repeats that you got in clues 4 and 5, and I think even clue 3, are broken in half so that I could keep the symbols large, but keep it all on one page. That was interesting. Yeah. Let's catch up in the chat. Lacey, hello friends. Sorry I'm late. Hope everyone is having a beautiful and spooky day. Well, thank you, Lacey. Thank you for joining. I know I am low energy today, and I can chat with you guys about that at the end. You may have noticed I am not my high energy, jumping around, excited self, and I didn't even set up my lights today. That will make a nice wall hanging. I think so. I'm just going to fold it up and put it away because it's just so huge. But unless you were talking about my swatch, because it would be a cute little wall hanging. I could easily, especially if I add a little border to it. And this one I did bead. So that's the other thing, is when I design patterns like this, and especially this one that required so many swatches because I haven't really done anything like this before. The closest thing I've ever created that resembles this is that Boo doily by Marcia Glassner, but it is still completely different. It's a circular doily. The ghosts are worked from the tail up, and it's a different shape, and I wanted different ghosts. So I had to do this whole thing completely from scratch, and it was a lot of trial and error. I knew that in advance. I knew that I wanted this to come out for this Halloween, so I planned to start working on it back in March, like really focusing on it and working on it. So I would do like a swatch a month in the background, because I can't just do one design at a time. I have to have multiple projects and designs going. So I keep these notes, and I rip them out and I put them in the project bags, because this isn't organized at all. Like, it's literally just, I grab the next page and I start drawing something, like a failed chart for the birdfoot hat. Like, it just happens. Testing a crescent shaped shawl. So because this isn't organized, and I'm generally not an organized person when I do something like swatch, and I'm also starting to learn to go to digital, but I end up tearing it off or using a loose sheet completely and keeping it in the project bag with my yarn, the label, the hook, and everything. And I also try to keep at the top with my swatch. So what it is and this was the very first original swatch. I went back, I frogged it, but I have the yarn, I have the colorway, I beaded the swatch because I needed to know how many beads and where they were going, weight of the yarn before I started, weight after finishing, which isn't there because I frogged it. That is going to tell you how much yarn you need to create that space, and you can use that to figure out how much yarn you need to create your overall piece based on your intended finish measurements. And then what exactly did I do? I chained 51 stitches. I had a 3-stitch border on either side of the chart. I worked 2 rows of plain double crochet before I followed my chart, and then 2 at the end, see template and drive. And so that is what I'm talking about, how I'm learning how to digitize this, or, save it digitally a little bit better, because then if I lose this, I still have the copy in my drive somewhere. And when I draw charts, I can scan them and save them in my drive as well. I sat down and I organized that. So that is the one area of my designing experience that is organized. I have design ideas folder, a designs in progress folder, and a finished designs folder, which I only just started doing this a couple years ago. So I had quite an issue when I had to go back. Somebody found a slight error in my hollow web shawl, and I wasn't organized with my drive yet, and I didn't have the original file, so I had to recreate the whole file based off the PDF. It was such a pain. But now in those folders, like under my finished design folder, I have a hollow web folder that has all of the individual charts that I created saved, all of the swatching papers that I have, any scanned charts that were hand-drawn, any photos of the shawl, any tester surveys, because I do, when I have people test, I usually have them fill out a Google survey. All of that's saved in there. So yeah, all that to say, I take really good notes on what the heck I'm doing. So this one was frogged. This one even has a date on it. And at this point, I had named the shawl Lift Your Spirit Swatch 2. And so I told you, I started back in March. Same thing, Schmutzerella yarns, what hook, yarn weight before. So I had frogged the entire thing. So I still had my 98 grams. After, this one got frogged too. I didn't mention that on this note, but it did. And same thing, kind of what I did, so that when I look at this, this one, I don't know where this one ended up, and I'm sure we'll get a refocus here soon. I don't know where the paper ended up for this one. I don't think it matters, because I ended up using it completely. Come on, camera. Get with the program. Notebook? Nothing? Oh, well. So yeah, I don't know where this one ended up, although I have a feeling this one ended up in a digital spreadsheet. There we go. Once I finished it, I created a swatch tab on my spreadsheet. And then that's when I learned about how to I use Google for everything. That's how I learned how to use Google spreadsheets to have it do all the math for the stitch count for each row. And once I was able to take all of the information from my swatch, how many stitches was how many inches, used how much yarn, I could use those formulas for it to auto-generate, you need this much yarn. Originally, I wasn't quite sure how these final ghosts were going to end up. And so I thought I only needed 3 hanks of yarn. And as I kept going, I realized I needed 4. And then I realized that I really needed 5. I didn't intend for it to be quite this large, but it is how it ended up. And that has to do with the fact, like I mentioned, the second set of ghosts on the large size do not start until after the tail of the first ghost's end. And that was to minimize charting, because as you guys followed along the pattern, I was able to separate those ghost repeats. Had that tail been a part of the second set of ghosts, it would have complicated the way that the charts ended up. And I thought that the repeats would be far too long and a little bit too concentration heavy to really be worth it. So I ended up pushing the second set of ghosts past the tail for that reason. And for those of you making the small, that was an afterthought. That was an afterthought of well, you know what? I feel like people will love this design, but they won't want to commit to such a large shawl and 5 hanks of fingering weight yarn, especially if you go with the indie dyed yarn. It is a very expensive project, and especially if you use the Colorline glow in the dark beads. It's an expensive project. So I thought, okay, let's offer a small size for people who are looking for something that is a little more budget friendly, but they can still participate. So I don't actually have a physical sample of the small size, but it should stop. The body of it should stop here, which is right under my bust, if your gauge is the same gauge as mine. And so you should ideally be able to take the 2 hands of the ghosts, if I can, the camera's backwards, and pin them together for a shawlette with these tails that run down your body. And there's just the 4, and that will leave your sleeves open here. So that is how it theoretically worked in my mind, which is why I kept trying to say in the mystery descriptions of everything, like the small is very small, like a shawlette, not even a full shawl. And again, as long as you get the same gauge as I did, obviously if you're using DK weight and you got a larger gauge, your shawl will be larger than that. But it was just a way that I was hoping that if people wanted to find a way to participate on more of a budget, that they were able to do that. Let me catch up with your chat. That'll make, yes, I caught that one. Lacey, look at that. Your design skills just blow my mind. You, dear, have a beautiful brain. Artsy brains are the coolest. Thank you, Lacey. I will say a lot of the knowledge that I've gained and have implemented into creating designs and experimenting with designs, because like the whole reason I do this is because I wanted a freaking ghost shawl. Like this, I wanted this for me. And there's nothing out there like it. And I had the idea on my paper. I like to draw my designs before I make them so I can see kind of what I'm working with. And especially when I first had the inspiration to start designing, I want to say in like 2013, my design my understanding of how to design crochet patterns and how the math works was so minimal. I did not, like, I knew the basic shapes, like when you're like with amigurumi and hats, I had done a lot of those. So I knew how to increase in a circle flat and then curve out when, like, stop increasing when you want it to go up, and then the decreasing math. I knew that basic math, but not this. Like, how do you shape a ghost? It wasn't until I had my 2 oldest kids were probably like 2 and 3. I was a stay-at-home mom going to school online using my GI Bill. And in my downtime, I would do like obsess over yarns and crafts like I always do. So I subscribed to Craftsy. I think this was before they became Blueprint. I know they're Craftsy again, but you could pay, I think they had offered a deal where you bought a subscription to their unlimited for a year, and it was only like $10 a month for the whole year. It could have been even cheaper, honestly. I don't remember at this point. So I would binge watch classes on Craftsy, and they have really good classes for knitting design, crochet design. I watched a great class by Marley Bird about how to design crochet garments. That's when I learned that traditional set in sleeve shaped sweaters use the Pythagorean theorem for the sleeve cap. I had no idea. My mind was blown, but I would just sit there and sponge up all this information. I didn't have the time to actually put it into practical use, but it was just soaking into my subconscious. The class, the reason I could do this design was the knitting, how to design knitting lace shawls class. I don't remember the instructor's name, but I'm sure they still have the class on Craftsy. Highly recommend that. It helps if you know how to knit, but it's also not, I feel like it's not completely necessary because it's the fundamentals, but it helps if you understand the terms that, like, of what a knitting decrease is, so that you could convert that over to like a crochet decrease. And then also with knitting, you're always doing one row at a time. So the shaping isn't as complicated as with crochet. You have different heights And so the shaping changes based on how deep you're going and how much you want to increase. It gets a little more complicated with crochet, and things like that aren't addressed in that class, but it is how I was able to draw my design on a chart and know how to chart it out so that the stitch counts worked. Manjara, I love the massive drawn piece. Thank you. I have a giant cork board in my kitchen that this was tacked to. It now holds all of my kids' art from school because they're 5 and 6. And so they bring home their holiday art pieces that they've created in school. But before that, this was just tacked in the middle of my kitchen, like super tacky. But it made me happy because I was so excited to design this shawl that every time I'd walk by and look at it, I would smile and get excited. So I did have to keep careful, though, not to like film any Instagram stories in the kitchen with it in the background. Not that anybody would have recognized what it was probably, but I knew once I started drawing this out that I wanted it to be a mystery because, I mean, have you guys been having fun with it being a mystery? I really hope so. And it really seems like it in the Facebook group. So I knew this was just destined to be a fun mystery crochet along. Yes, just watch. I am actually planning to do just one of the triangles if the pattern for my sons to hang on the wall in their room. Nice. The other thing you could do as well is kind of like I did with the swatch, wherever it may have fallen. Of course, this isn't the same ghost, but if you can visually isolate or even draw around the ghost itself, you could just start a rectangle and start the ghost. And if you're following the chart, you could read the ghost outside of that to get yourself a full rectangle as well. I've also considered how fun this ghost would be as a panel on a cardigan. I needed a break from it though, because this was such a time commitment and so much work that after a while of working on it, ripping it out, and then just slowly going through it and then having to write it all. I haven't even mentioned that part yet. The pattern took me an entire week to write because, as you've seen, each row is unique. And writing out the written instructions is not my strong point. Creating the chart took a lot of time too. That took another week of me working on it. I can't work full-time because I am still, I have kids that I'm the primary provider of. So what feels like full-time to me is really only part-time work. Like I can fit in maybe 20 to 25 hours a week of work outside of my mom responsibilities. So it felt like full-time to me, but technically it's part-time. It took a whole week to write and a whole week to chart. And then it took my tech editor several days to tech edit because it's so much at once. Like you guys got it in little clues, but imagine if you got smacked with 20 pages, over 100 unique rows with 6 charts. It's a lot. And my tech editor charges by the hour, so it was expensive to get tech edited, but I needed it. And unfortunately, there were some issues still in the first clue, but we were able to work around them, find them, get them fixed out. But so far, I haven't seen any issues come up in the pattern at all. Since then, I don't think I had to issue any updates to clues 2 or 6. And I was able to take those split up clues and update the full master copy so that there's no issues with that either. But I mean, this was a ton of work. So much work. Lacey, worth every single penny. I absolutely think so. That is the thing with independent designing is, especially if you want to do something so complicated and a little more complex, it is a big bill that you have to foot. I mean, absolutely. It's a large time commitment. This one was an expensive project by my choice. I wanted to use indie dyed yarn. I got these fancy glow-in-the-dark beads. But I mean, Nancy gifted me the first hank, but I bought the rest of the yarn that I needed to make the shawl. I bought the beads. I paid for the tech editing. I also hired a graphic designer to design the image that you all saw for the placeholder, because how do you market a crochet along without a picture of the pattern? It just was a lot of an initial cost, but it felt super worth it for me. And it is a pattern that I will be selling after this mystery crochet long ends. So I do think it will eventually hit that point that it has then paid for itself and then starts to bring in an income. But I mean, if you think designing crochet patterns is a get rich quick scheme, it is definitely not. It is a place for passion and enjoyment and excitement. I love it so much. I have this like innate need to express creativity and create things that have never been made before. And so this fills that void for me. It is not about the money, but it would be nice for designs to pay off themselves. Ghosts holding hands. Yes, I must be behind in the chat. Once I got past this part in my shawl, because when I drew the entire chart, I couldn't see the repeats. Kind of like if you guys are in the Facebook group, you may have seen, and I don't remember her name, the one gal who printed out the chart for the first clue and taped them together so that you could actually see how the full repeat sat. That would have been smart if I would have done that on my own. I didn't. I had kind of sketched what it might look like, but I had no idea how it was actually going to wear. And had I done that full size, I could have put it on and realized how cool is it that the ghosts sit in the front of you like that. That is one of my favorite parts about the way this whole design sits. And the fact that the ghosts are centered on your spine in the back. Like, that is so cool. I love it so much. The only thing is I did have to make sure to wear a black shirt today so that you can see the ghosts, because if you are wearing any light colors at all, they don't show up quite as strongly if you've made the white one. The ghosties will be holding hands. I saw a Facebook ad for Craftsy, and apparently after a few takeovers, the quality and especially customer service has really gone down. I'm glad you got to enjoy it while it was still good, though. That is super disappointing. And I do know I used to work with a gal who actually has at least a class, if not more, on Craftsy. And she did say that it was so much work to create the class and that she didn't feel fairly compensated for the amount of work and investment they were asking for. So it's likely that a lot of their downfall has to do with the way that they were treating their artists and teachers. I don't know. That was just hearsay from one person. I haven't worked with them. But I know as a user of the company's services, I was able to absorb so much information because I not only watched, and while you had the unlimited subscription, you had access to all of the class materials and downloads for the class. So I still have all of those resources available to me because I saved them on my computer, even though I can't access the classes because I don't have a current subscription. I did the knitting classes, I did crochet classes, I did spinning classes. That's when I learned how to do some art yarn techniques, but my wheel's not really set up for that. And it's also not something I'm super in love with. So it never really clicked with me. I also took a master gardening class on there, which, I mean, I still have a lot to learn. Every year, I always mess something in my garden up. This year it was tomatoes. I planted way too many close together and I'm losing tomatoes because I can't get to them. I shouldn't have planted that many. I just got too excited, and you learn something every year. But it helped me learn the foundations that really helped my garden become what it is today. So yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that there's kind of this double-edged sword to that company. Manjar, it's me, Manda B. Oh, I get, how do I miss the crossover between the names in the Facebook group, the Instagram handles, and the YouTube handles? Manda B, I've got your shawl to share at the end. I didn't set it up so it's going to be quick and easy, but I will be able to pull it up. You and Lindsay dropped photos in the thread this week. I know I got it up later than usual, and I can mention that again when we get closer to the end, though. I think making big scary patterns as mystery crochet longs are kind of trick some crocheters into trying something and realizing that they can do more than they thought they could. I did that one time with mosaic. I didn't necessarily intend that, but it is, and that is something that I saw firsthand with the comments in the Facebook group is some people who are even more beginner crocheters were attempting this pattern, and it is an intense pattern. And the feedback I got from my testers was that it's definitely intermediate, if not more of an expert level pattern, because of all the shaping and how long and just like how much focus is required to read the written instructions, or you really need to learn how to read charted instructions. I saw people learning to read charted instructions because they're easier to follow for this pattern, which is so exciting because that skill unlocks this whole world of possibilities for some more complex lace patterns to be followed. That's why I ended up learning to read charts. When I first started crocheting, charts just really weren't popular. I think it's because it was something that really couldn't be created and printed. I haven't seen any charts in any of like the 1940s workbooks that I got from my great grandma. But now with the creation of the internet and all of the digital software that you can create digital art with, I think the charts are really taking off. And there are some books that every pattern in it is charted, and just makes it so much easier. I feel like the pattern would make a badass duster. Yes, that's what I'm thinking, right? Like down in the front at the bottom, or even like two stacked. That might be too long, but it would make it a duster. Yeah, I just was thinking about it. Feel free to use the charts of the ghosts and have fun with your own. Absolutely. Lacey, I would love to sign up for a crafty type thing and take classes. I love to learn. Yeah. I mean, I hope that it's not as bad as they say, because it was such a great resource for me, but that was years ago, at least 4 years ago. At Lacey, definitely. I've never done any pattern like this, never worked with beads either. That is crazy because your shawl looks so good. I would have never guessed. Your shawl looks almost identical to mine. Your gauge was spot on. And you were super helpful in the beginning when I had some errors in my clue. Like, you caught on right away. So I was talking about how it took me so long to write. This was the first time that I've ever written a pattern that was this complicated with repeats. And I didn't quite realize how important it is if you're going to take. So if you're used to following traditional written crochet patterns, which is it's how I learned. So that's my brain is very much like, crochet patterns should be written this way. This is how they have been written since the beginning of time. Well, since the beginning of written crochet time, right? So, but I don't like having to add that instruction of double crochet in next to double crochet. So as you have seen in my pattern, I cut that next out. I feel like you can shorthand it as long as it's clear enough. And the biggest way you can do that is if you put the number in front, it means all in the next stitch. If you put the number at the end, it means one in each of the next, which is why I also added that note in the beginning of how I wrote it that way. But it wasn't that way originally. I had the numbers in the front, and Maud caught a couple of my numbers that after I wrote the whole thing, I had to go back and move the numbers from the front to the back side of the stitch. And she caught a couple where it was in the front. So having not ever done a pattern like this, I'm super surprised because you were very helpful. Amanda. Lacey, dude, I planted a pineapple from one that we are, and it actually produced a pineapple the night before the day I was going to pick it to eat it, and animal ate it. Okay, because I know you live in Florida, and it cracks me up because I tried to garden in Georgia, which is not the same as gardening in Washington. I was born and raised here, and you can literally, it's still not the best idea, but you can go in your backyard, dig up a patch, and plant, and things will grow, and they will grow well. We have so much rain and such rich soil that it doesn't require that much work. When I moved to Georgia, I didn't realize that. I dug up a plot, I planted, and Nothing grew because it was clay. It was clay, and there was not the right resources and nutrients in the soil. Nothing did well. The only thing that did well is I bought a container that was meant to grow upside down tomatoes. And you could plant peppers that grew out the top. And because of the climate down there, both of those plants did very well. My peppers did well, the tomatoes did well, but right as my tomatoes ripened, my dogs ate them. I was so bummed because the whole garden was a whole mess. But that little area that was doing well, the dogs ate them. So I feel you. Manager, I must say you did an excellent job. I find the pattern super well written and the chart's great too. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think charts are so wonderful. They bridge language gaps. My old crochet books all use charts, but I feel like they went out of fashion for a bit. Glad they are making a comeback. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, and the other thing, like you said, they bridge language gaps. There are some amazing crochet charts that are available for the one that I saw at the local yarn store I used to work at the whole book was in Japanese. And it had charts for all the designs, though, so you could still make them without having the English pattern. And that, I think, is the most important thing. Thank you so much. You're welcome. Lori, I need to come pick all your stuff for you. Yeah, Lori came over yesterday and she saw the state of my garden. I have not been able to pick and maintain it because my partner is a travel nurse and he has been gone for quite a large chunk out of this last month. And with the young baby and the two kids, I'm just so busy. I haven't really made the time to get out there and pick everything. I do have to go pick my peppers though, because we're about to have a freeze. And I do have a large selection of jalapeno peppers and serrano peppers, some banana peppers, and some Tabasco peppers that I risk to lose if we get hit with a really bad frost like we're supposed to. But yeah, so I feel like that was everything I wanted to share about the behind the scenes of this pattern. I can't think of anything that I could have missed. So why don't I go ahead and pull up the pictures that I was going to share of the spoilers from the group, because Clue 6 came out yesterday, and Manjara, Amanda B, sent in a picture of some of her ghost tales already completed. Let me see. I usually prep this before I come on, so I don't have to do it so slow. Share screen. My Chrome tab. There we go. And then I usually have it already set up to present mode. There we go. So there is Amanda B's version. So far, she's got half the ghost done. I feel like after completing the entire shawl, these tails just fly right by. They just zoom, zoom, zoom. So I hope you guys have fun with the tails. I hope you don't hate it. I know it is definitely a different type of aesthetic, but I thought it added to the overall spooky, drapey nature of the ghost theme, which is another reason the small size is so small. I wanted to keep those tails, and the only way to do that was to stop that high up in the shawl. If you wanted to modify the pattern for a more medium size, you could just stop like maybe a row after the end point of the first set of ghosts, and then you could literally leave it like that or add some sort of decorative border if you wanted, but there wasn't really a way to add those tails again, which is why I ended up with the two sizes. It's also a reason I decided not to include the finished dimensions when I was promoting the Mystery Crochet Along, because as you can tell, especially for the small size, from the starting point to a tail, I feel like would have been a bit deceiving about the actual finished size of this shawl because there's such large gaps in between the ghosts. And then the other photo I got to share was from Lindsay Knitwim, and she is using the exact same yarn as I am. I know that the Unicorn Blood colorway from Schmutzerella Yarns. I think it just is so perfect for this pattern. The shawl's looking so good. I can't wait until you finish it and you can block it and really get all of those open spaces to the chain spaces to open up and let the weight of the beads really add some nice swing and drape to the overall project. Remove myself. I meant to remove that. There we go. So those are the spoilers from the group that I had to share. Lacey, for anyone who has seen that I was having pain from carpal tunnel, I know, boo. Also, punny. I have found an amazing hook that prevents that pain and does not affect my dumb sensory issues. Would be fancy if interested. So I did actually see the hook that Lacey's talking about. Lacey, do you have a name of where you got that hook from that you can share with everybody? Because it's this like wooden, or at least it looks wooden. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Lacey. It's like this wooden handle that looks like it curves, not necessarily curves, but it has curves and angles that looks like it nestles right in your hand, and it looks so unbelievably comfortable. And she said there's actually more than one grip in the hook. So I'm really hoping that that works out for your carpal tunnel. I know that I am not going to doubt that it's something that I will be dealing with in my future. So any sort of preventative measures or comfortable hooks, I'm all over that. So if you have the name of that company, definitely share it. Gorgeous work. Yes, their shawls are beautiful, as are everyone else's shawls. And it's so fun to watch where everyone posts, because I kind of spread myself thin on social media. I try to be a little bit of everywhere. So I know that I got emailed pictures of progress for people that just do YouTube and they don't do other social medias. I got tagged on TikTok videos that I've only seen their shawls in TikTok. Some people have posted there and in the Facebook group as well. Some people I've only seen them post in the Facebook group. And then some people I've also only seen their projects on Ravelry. So it's crazy to see all of the shawls in the different places. And there's only one that is super questionable, and it makes me laugh. And she admits it herself. And it's the one by Foxpaw Studios on TikTok. She decided to do the shawl as a scrap buster, which we didn't know what the shawl was going to look like, right? She started with her biggest scraps first, which you have the smallest number of stitches first. So there are these giant blocks of color. And then once you get to like clues 4 and 5, the rows are so long, and she's using smaller and smaller amounts of scraps. She named it kaleidoscope mode, because the colors literally just look like a kaleidoscope. And I am dying to see what happens with these tails when she gets there. It's the only one where I'm like, color choices are questionable, but I also don't hate it. It's just something else. If you're on TikTok, check it out. I'll see if maybe I can duet a video with her when she finishes it. Lacey, this group has so much talent. It really does. Absolutely. Lori, I've so enjoyed seeing everyone's projects. I have as well. It's been so much fun. Yeah, so we're almost at the end of the live here. So I almost didn't come on this morning. You guys, I am so tired, which is why I'm low energy. I showered and dried my hair and had some coffee and breakfast and was like, I need to just hit live. I went to the ER last night, and I was going back and forth on whether I should have gone in the first place at all. But overall, I think it was a good choice. I got a really bad migraine yesterday in the afternoon. It came on really fast, and I had fatigue, and I've never had a migraine this bad before. And I've had pretty good migraines, to the point that I'm dry heaving, but this one was different. I have never had a migraine to the point that it affected my vision, and that I couldn't walk. My knees were buckling underneath me, and I just felt so weak. So I ended up going into the ER, and they think that all of my symptoms are just from the migraine, but they did give me a follow-up with a neurologist so I can go and get that checked out. I feel better today. I'm really tired. They gave me meds, so I don't have the migraine. I hope it doesn't come back. But my eye is not back to normal. It's another reason I'm wearing my glasses and not my contacts. When it first came on, both of my eyes were super cloudy, but my left eye never went back to normal. And it's still what I consider cloudy. And they kept saying, "Oh yeah, you have blurred vision." And I'm like, it's not blurry, it's cloudy. It's kind of like when you have eye boogers in your eyes and then you wipe them away and you're fine, except I can't wipe them away. And my vision is just different in my left eye. So it's kind of scary, but I mean, he thinks it's just from the migraine. We'll follow up with the neurologist and make sure that it's nothing more than that. But because I went to the ER last night, I did not sleep very well. So, but yeah, that is what's going on with that today. So yeah, it's one of those things where it's like I don't feel like I should have to go to the ER for a migraine, but also the loss of control. I am a particularly healthy person, and I've never experienced that kind of weakness for no reason. Like I'm decently strong too. Just the weakness and the inability to walk and the loss of control was extremely scary. But not, yeah, right. Not usually that intense. Thank you, Lacey. Lori. Yeah, I'm so sorry about that, Lori. Have you ever been in a wreck? I haven't. And that was the other thing that he was asking, if I had had any head trauma or any falls or any reason that anything would like this would happen. And there was literally nothing. When the headache first came on, I thought, oh, maybe I'm just dehydrated. And I always keep Pedialyte here for the kids in case. And so I started drinking that, and it did help me feel better. The big concern is just that my eye is not back to normal. Yeah, it was very scary. I think they call it a migraine aura. My husband gets those vision effects, but just before a migraine sets in and during. Yeah, that's the other part that's weird is after they gave me the meds to help deal with the migraine, I couldn't feel it. And I was expecting my vision in my left eye to go back to normal, and it's just still not. And like everything's just a bit of a shade darker with my left eye too. And like I almost feel like it's swollen, but it doesn't look swollen. So I don't know what's going on. I'm gonna let the doctors figure it out. But yeah, that was my night last night. I suffer from them too, and I wouldn't wish them on anyone. Glad you're feeling better. Hope it goes well with the neurologist. Thank you. And that is what I've heard from people who suffer from migraines. I have never experienced this before, and I have had an uptick in migraines in the last couple months, but nothing like this. So maybe this is something that's in my future. And they gave me a printout of like how all of those things can happen from migraines, and that like you're predisposed if you're a white woman menstruating. And it just was like no luck for me. They asked that because it sounds kind of like what they call floaters. I have them, and it's literally like when you walk outside and it's bright, but then come back in and you can't quite see. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I wonder if that's what it is. I might as well get in to see an eye doctor as well. That's what mine does with my vision. Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much, Lacey. And thank you to everybody who participated in the mystery crochet along. Make sure you download your clues while they're free, because after the 15th, the pattern will go up for sale. I believe if it's in your Ravelry library, you don't have to worry about it, and you should be able to download it for life because you downloaded it while it's free. If you have any issues with that, send me a message and I'll hook you up because I know you participated. So, but yeah, other than that, I'm going to let you guys go. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. And when you finish your shawls, definitely share them in the Facebook group or email them to me or tag me. Anyway, I cannot wait to see them. Have a great rest of your day. Until next time, happy crafting.